Hi, Brian Hour from feelingnegative.com. This is our third video episode. This time around we will be contact printing off of our paper negatives from video episode number 2. So we'll be taking this guy from my pinhole camera and we'll go ahead and put it down and shoot some actual prints from it. So let's get this thing set up. Now we're using the same setup that we did in episode number 2. Actually, it's exactly the same setup. I haven't tore it down yet from the previous episode. We're using the same exact stop bath, same exact fixer, the Ilfa stop at, 1+19, and then the rapid fixer at 1+9. So these are actually the same chemicals that we used to develop the paper negative. This I changed out. The Rodinol that we had in here, that's a one-shot film developer. So I went ahead and dumped that out. Now we're using a paper developer. This is the Ilford multi-grade, and this is at 1+9, so that'll give us a developing time of about 60 seconds. And that's pretty much spot on as long as you have your exposure on. So that's already mixed up in here. We're up to temperature. I've got a bag of ice to kind of cool it down. We've got our timer there, so we're ready to go from down the line and into the wash. So now we can go ahead and get our enlarger set up and start making some test exposures. Okay, so on this end of the darkroom, we've got the enlarger that I'm going to use to make the contact print with my contact printer. And here we have our paper negative again. Now you can do the same type of thing. If you don't have an enlarger, you can just use like a white light source. If you hold it kind of above, like maybe 3 feet above the paper and very low powered light source, turn it on for however many seconds. Now you're going to have to dial it in and figure out how to expose it, but you have control over how much time you expose for and also the distance that you're exposing. So if it's still too bright, you can move it farther away. If it's not bright enough, you can move it closer. So that's another way to do it. But I'm going to go ahead and use the enlarger with the lens so I can control my aperture, and I've also got multi-grade filters in here so I can control my contrast. So what I'm basically going to do now is run some test strips, and I think I'm going to run a strip right down here so I can get my real dark areas and my real bright areas all at the same time, and I'm just going to do maybe 2 or 3 or 4 exposures to figure out where we need to be so we can start dialing it in. So when you're making contact prints, you want emulsion to emulsion. So shiny side of the paper, the test strip up, shiny side of the negative or the part with color on it down, and you're going to make an emulsion sandwich like this. So like I said, I'm going to probably do this area here. So I'm going to place that here, lift up my contact printer, and I'm going to shoot somewhere in that area. I've got this piece of cardboard that I'm going to use to mask as I go, so that each portion is a different exposure. So we'll start off with 4 seconds and shoot that. Okay, I'm going to lay down paper over about a third, or the cardboard over about a third of the test strip. And I'm going to shoot another 4 seconds. That's going to give us 8 seconds of exposure. So now that we have a 4 and 8 second exposure, I'm going to move it over to the last third. I'm going to change my time to 8 seconds now. Shoot it again, and that'll give us 16. Alright, so I have developed the strip that we just shot on the enlarger, the contact print. And you can see here we've got 3 different levels. We've got the 4 second exposure, the 8 second exposure, and the 16 second exposure. So what I can tell from this is that my 4 second exposure is definitely too short because I don't have any blacks, I just got grays. The 8 seconds still looks a little bit light. The 16 looks pretty close. I've got some real solid blacks in there, and I can compare against here on my border because I've chopped down my negative a little bit to give me a black border. So what I'm thinking is somewhere between probably 8 and 16. Okay, so here's our most recent test strip against our first test strip. I ran it at 15 seconds, and you can see the difference even between 15 seconds and 16 seconds on the test strip. Part of that is due to the slight time difference between 15 and 16. The other part is due to the fact that these timers may or may not be exact. So when you start stacking times for doing test exposures, they may not be exact. That's why you got to run kind of a full strip. If I had just run this as a full sheet, it would have been wrong, obviously. So what that tells me is that I need to bump my time up a little bit. I might bump it up to about 18 seconds, add a few more. Remember, the second test strip was at 15 seconds with a number 1.5 filter. The one on the top was at 18 seconds with a number 1 filter. So we lowered the contrast a little bit and also increased the exposure to darken it. Okay, so after our fourth test strip on top versus our third test strip on bottom, what we're seeing here is no change in exposure. We've got 18 seconds and f5.6. Top is a number 1/2 filter and a number 1 filter on the bottom. So now here we go after 4 test strips. We're going to run a full sheet test print. You know, if it's good, we'll keep it. If not, we'll make some more adjustments. But we're going to keep 18 seconds, f5.6, and a number 1 filter. So let's lay this guy down, and I'll take you through the whole process on this one between, you know, exposing and developing and everything else. So I'm going to try to kind of center this, and then I've actually trimmed down my negative to the point where it will leave a small border right around the whole image. Okay, move that back. Okay, so we'll go ahead and expose that. Okay, now that our full print's been exposed, we got to go ahead and develop this thing. So I've got my timer all set up. I've got a countdown schedule for, you know, each tray. So we're going to do 1 minute, 30 seconds, and 1 minute, and then we're going to go ahead and wash it out. So we're up to the right temperature and everything. I'm going to go ahead and drop this in fast and then start my timer basically. Now when I'm developing prints with a print developer, I like to do a constant, kind of a slow agitation like this. Now whatever you decide to do, you see how quickly that showed up compared to when we did our negative. That showed up a lot slower because we were trying to develop slower for lower contrast. But this showed up relatively quick. And that's only really halfway through the development. So the rest of this time, the last 30 seconds, is basically just filling in those blacks, you know, all your shadows and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I like to do the constant agitation. That's just my method. Whatever you do, just stick with it. That way, you know, all your print settings and everything don't change every time you go to develop. Alright, so I've got my timer set to beep at me when I need to pull it out. I got a 10-second drip. Drain off as much of that as we can, and then it's into the stop bath. Alright, so after several test strips and a couple of full sheet tests, we took our paper negative that I shot in my pinhole camera, and we went and made a positive, you know, an image, a print image basically. The process that we went through of, you know, setting up the enlarger and doing the exposure and the contrast and all of that, that's really the same process that you're going to go through with printing from film and enlarging from that. The only difference was that our film was the same size as our paper, and it was just sandwiched straight down onto the paper. So that's really all a contact print is. It's no different than doing film. So hopefully you learned a couple of things while we were doing this process, and that, you know, you can get some pretty cool prints from paper negatives. So I'll show you guys a little closer up and what I was going for with this. Alright, there's our final print. This was the one that I ran a couple seconds longer than the last one that I showed, you know, the whole development process. We got our blacks a little bit darker, but, you know, what I didn't want to do was completely burn out all those blacks. So it's a little bit of a, you know, less than perfect exposure, but for what it is, it's not bad. You know, being a pinhole shot on a paper negative in full broad daylight, it's not bad. So what this actually is my wife sitting on a bench. She's here, and what I was going for was kind of a ghost image. I had her sit in the image for about 30 or 35 seconds out of a 70-second exposure. So really only her head ghosted, but you know, I'll have to retry and try to get a better ghost portrait image again. So anyways, better luck next time. We'll see you in the next video.